Welcome to Beyond 100 Days, everyone. Let's talk about the education ministry under the Tinubu administration, as well as the challenges ahead of it. Thanks for joining us on the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. You can join us. You can join today's conversation on X, formerly Twitter, using the hashtag Beyond 100 Days. Remember to tag at TVC News NG. Despite government promises over the years to allocate more of its annual budget to education, the sector is still receiving less than 10%, resulting in lack of resources and poor educational institutions in Nigeria. Let's talk about what the new administration of President Tinubu is bringing on board. A 2022 UNESCO report says approximately 20 million Nigerian individuals are not enrolled in school, and this amounts to some 20% of Nigeria's entire population. It's a big deal for Africa's largest economy, and also its implication on the continent at large is quite baffling. We're looking at quite a number of issues on the show today. A lot has been said about out-of-school children, ASUU strike, fees hike in universities, insecurity in our schools, among several others. The big question, however, is what is the new administration of President Tinubu bringing on board? I'm joined now by the Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Mamman, a senior advocate of Nigeria, who joins us live from our Abuja studio. The new minister, we understand, is the first indigenous VC of Base University, Abuja, and the first senior advocate in Adamawa State. I hope I'm right, Professor.
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's say congratulations on your appointment yet again. We have a lot to talk about in a few minutes, so let's begin. Particularly the International Day to Protect Education from Attack was commemorated a few days ago, and that's perhaps a good place to start. The concern usually before now has been terror attacks and abduction in our schools, but I'm sure you also followed the recent killing of a 200-level four-year student. That seems to have expanded the insecurity challenges bedeviling our schools. How is your ministry responding to this?
Well, we are very sad about it because our students, our schools are places for learning. And where we have a situation where students are not sure of their safety and their security and all those who are working there, it is certainly a cause for concern. And so we are working with the security agencies and the administrations of those institutions to ensure that our institutions remain safe for learning, not a place for terror and fear of terror. And you remember some 2 weeks ago, the NSA had actually even issued a statement to this effect, directing security agencies to ensure the safety of schools. So we are working with security agencies and also ensure that the physical situation of universities is also protected. So we are also looking at a situation where schools and universities are fenced, and then university administrators and heads of other institutions also look into some of the social vices which foster this kind of thing in the university, like cultism, for instance, is one of the things which breed insecurity amongst students. So we are looking at a whole range of things to ensure that people remain safe in their institutions and places of learning.
I hear you, Honorable Minister, talking about safety of our schools. The federal government said it's allocated some 15 billion naira to fund the implementation of financing Safe Schools initiative for 2023. The Minister of Education is a stakeholder here. How much progress is being made in that regard? And how much impact is this expected to have?
Well, I don't have the figures here, but I know substantial amount of money have been disbursed to institutions to advance these projects. And as I said, I cannot tell the physical mileages achieved in that regard, but the government has done its part by releasing the appropriate sums of money for this purpose.
Professor Mamman, we have arguably one of the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. You mentioned recently that President Tinubu has directed the return of 10.5 million out-of-school children to school at the expiration of his tenure. The first question is, where is government getting its numbers from? Because according to a 2022 UNESCO report, that figure is approximately 20 million that are not enrolled in schools. So are we on the same page here?
Well, the actual figure regarding children out of school is still a bit of a moving target. And we in the ministry, having come in now, we are putting in place measures to be sure we have reasonably accurate figures with regards to the number of children. But at the moment, what we have as the official statistics on it is about 10.5 to 11 million. Those other agencies like UNICEF that is parading or mentioning 20 million, I don't know the data they used. And so it's not something that we can plan with. But certainly, whether it is 10 million or 20 million or anything in between is unacceptable. That number is almost the population of another country, or many countries for that matter. So it's not good for us as a country to have that figure. And the president being so concerned about the well-being of every Nigerian, he wants us to account for the education level and the occupational level of every Nigerian is concerned about it. And it is therefore one of the 8 priority areas which he directed that the Education Ministry and other agencies which have some responsibility in this regard, work on to ensure that sooner than later we eliminate it. And as a fact, that there are multiple agencies in Nigeria, even in the Ministry of Education, can count at least about 3 or so, if not more. We have MASCOM agency, we have UBEC, and quite a number of them that have, as part of their mandate, policies that will reduce, if not eliminate, the out-of-school children. And there's also another one which was passed, the law for which was passed in the last days of the last administration, which is the Almajiris and the out-of-school children, specifically on this matter. And sooner we are already making steps. We've gone very far to ensure that that Correct. Agency takes off very, very soon. And well, it's a problem that we cannot have too much attention on it. And
top on the list,
the existence of
Honorable Minister, yes. Why many of our children are out of school is insecurity, but there's also the economic factor. Let's talk about the hike in fees, for instance, at the universities and in unity schools. We hear university management now saying the increment is due to high inflation and that they aren't generating enough. Now we've seen protests by students in UNILAG where the management is threatening to shut down the school. What is government doing to salvage the situation?
Well, the first thing to note is that tuition is free, and the president has reiterated this many times in the universities. And then, secondly, the government also has a constitutional duty to offer education at the basic level in the first 9 years of children in Nigeria. Now, while tuition is free, universities have been challenged all over in the cost of keeping students, in the cost of providing the various services, like electricity, for instance. If you take Unilag, the Vice Chancellor reported very recently that they spend about 180 million a month just on energy, on electricity, not to talk about diesel, not to talk about the other running costs, water, academic support services, conferences, researches, and all such needs. Now, particularly since the skyrocketing prices of goods and services in the last few months, they have been quite challenged, honestly, to meet all these things. And it's only appropriate that parents make some contribution, make some sacrifices to the welfare and well-being of their wards when they are in the university. And I wouldn't even call it a charge because this tuition is free. So it's basically some modest contribution to some of these things. However, this government being a very listening government, we are discussing with the vice chancellors of this university. If it can be less, if they can do with less than what they have charged so far. And I think in the days and weeks ahead, there may be changes in this regard. But
Prof, thankfully you were a former VC yourself, and you understand that the position of government that tuition is free does no longer holds water for Nigerians who are feeling the brunt. Some of the fees have gone as high as 100 or 200%. But at the annual education conference on Monday, you talked about the federal government granting universities autonomy to explore new sources of financing. How is that expected to work? Because right now, management is talking about administration fee, accommodation and things like that, that is changing the figure totally. When you now put the administration, when you put autonomy in the hands of universities, what's the fate of Nigerian students, and how is that supposed to help them?
Well, the long-term solution to all these things is actually to grant universities complete autonomy in all facets of their life. At the moment, the financial autonomy is not full, but government is inclined to that, granting universities financial autonomy so that, as they are doing now with staff, other governance issues, universities can have the freedom to charge some modest fees or the fees that are necessary for the running of the universities. They will now also have the opportunity to explore other sources of funding to run their programs. They can have business ventures. They can have some grants and donations from people who want to endow in various areas of research. They can also explore, support from alumni, which in the world is a very major source of funding. If you take Harvard, for instance, a large chunk of its funding comes from alumni. And government can come in through sponsoring researches in particular areas of need, as is done in other countries. So in this way, universities can actually be very busy and be very buoyant in their revenue stream against the situation that we have now where everybody is struggling. The universities management is facing very tough challenges in meeting their needs, but their hands are...
I understand your position, Professor. Permit me to butt in very shortly. The idea of universities now generating their own income and also helping, the administration, so to speak. But if you are to speak to Unilag students, for instance, who are returning to the street tomorrow to protest the hike in their fees, what would you say to them? Is there any intervention in sight for those students who are saying they cannot afford the new fees?
Well, the first thing to do is to appeal to them that really what the university is charging it's a very necessary contribution from parents and students. But as I said, we are also engaging the university to see if it can be less. So this is the basic message. It's a combination of understanding from parents and students, and then while we look at what the University of Lagos and other institutions have charged to see if they can do with less at the moment, despite the pressures they are facing.
All right. So there is the position of inflation, as highlighted by the school management. There's also what you have said about the need for universities to begin to generate incomes for themselves. But you agree with me that we're not doing well, with our education funding. 15 to 20% budgetary allocation is considered the international benchmark, according to some UN documents. And it would seem that we're still doing way below 10%. You have promised a 25% increment with the right policies in place. What policies are you referring to? And is that in the short term?
Well, this government inherited a support level for the university, which we all admit can be better. And that's why even in his campaign manifesto and the policy documents given to the ministers, the president has stated his ability, his willingness to go up to 25% in terms of his support for the university, which is unparalleled, which is very huge. Once the right policies are provided for that support, I mean, this is somebody who knows and the centrality of education in the economy of any country, and so he's prepared to put on the table up to 25% of the national budget once the right policies are put forward to him. And that is what we are working on at the moment. Sooner than later, we are going to come out with very robust policies that will change the tide in the education sector of Nigeria. And towards that, we have set up a roadmap committee, which is working very hard on this. We are also working in the ministry on reviewing a number of policies on the ground and seeking to ensure implementation of some very laudable policies actually which are on ground, so that we have the education system of our dream in Nigeria.
The 2024 budget is due in December. Precisely, should Nigerians expect a significant change, as to the promises you've made in increased funding in the next budget cycle?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm asking that should Nigerians expect a significant increase in education funding in the 2024 budget that is due this December?
Oh yes, certainly. As I said at the beginning, the president is prepared to put in up to 25% of the national budget once he has the right policies on the ground. So this is somebody who is really determined to change the tide of education in Nigeria. So we have that, and that's very huge. I mean, from the current 5% to 25%, this is a very huge jump. So that's why we are working on the policies and the right priorities that will enable Mr. President to support that sector with that level of funding.
Nigerians are counting on it, and we're also looking forward to it. Let's talk about the Student Loan Act. It's perhaps one of the first bills the president signed into law in his first few days after inauguration, and people have been talking about how this would help. Tuition fees will no longer be an excuse for Nigerian students to get higher education. But precisely how does this work? Who is eligible, and when can students begin to access it?
Well, let me put it this way. The Ministry of Education is not hosting the student loan scheme. But what we know at this stage is that the guidelines are being concluded, and the timeline for accessing it is not far far away. I understand it's likely to be from October, so it's not far away. And certainly that would go a long way in supporting students, because some of the initial ceilings, I understand, are being reviewed so that it will now be fairly open-ended to students. And but the major thing is that there will be no limitations to Nigerian students who can access that facility from October. And it probably will start, it may start with some level of institutions first before it becomes available to all the institutions. As you know, those in the public institution will likely be the beneficiaries for a start before probably there will be a further review of the loans. But the important thing is that very soon students will be able to access that loan.
All right, so we can't let you go without talking about, the big elephant in the room, ASUU strike. As a professor yourself, who's been the vice chancellor, you're familiar with how that has become a perennial occurrence in our schools, and the huge impact it's had on the quality of education over the years. ASUU keeps going back to the issue of agreement. It keeps complaining about government's inability to honor agreements it entered into, and you wonder why enter into an agreement you can't keep. Is there any end in sight, and what's your strategy to end in this?
Well, thank you. My position with regards to what unions do in the universities and other unions and tertiary institutions is that these people are very passionate about what they are doing. They are very patriotic people. The lecturers and their leaderships. Basically, what is always the issue is communication with them, and good faith between them and the government officials and the people who are involved in negotiations. And transparency too, because if you engage, if there's a proper engagement right at the outset and some understanding, it shouldn't be difficult to come up with agreements that will be acceptable to everybody, and then avoid strikes. Now, on our own part, our own policy is to put in place a consultative platform where we engage ourselves with the leaderships of the union, and then we will make known to them that resources available to government are actually not, they are not infinite. And while government is definitely will be open to supporting, and as I have said at the beginning, this government is prepared to put in place up to 25% of its budget in support of education. They will be beneficiaries. And then there are other interventions here and there. Yes,
I'm sorry, we have to go now. So I just want you to comment on this in 1 minute. The latest threat from ASUU as we speak is about the payment of the 8 months withheld salaries of the lecturers on account of what they call the 2022 Patriotic Strike Action. According to them, it was triggered by government's failure to honor these agreements. What do you think should government pay lecturers when they're on strike? And would President Tinubu be clearing this backlog?
Well, ordinarily, the reason for that is backed by law, backed by acts, and then there's also a judgment. But as I said, through engagement, it's possible to secure some understanding for every policy. So this is just what I can say on that at the moment.
All right. I like how you diplomatically and stylishly avoided being direct, answering that very directly, because your colleagues are also watching. We wish you all the best, Honorable Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Mamman. Thank you so much for talking to us on TVC News.
Thank you for having me. God bless.
Well, that's our program today. You can watch it again at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. We're back tomorrow at 6 p.m. with a fresh episode. I'm Nifemi Oguntoye.